Ever since going on a YouTube conspiracy theory deep dive and realizing I'm in a Mandela effect Berenstain Bears timeline, a lot of stuff has been confusing to me. And I wanted to make one thing a little bit less confusing, and that's going to be naming certain chords on a guitar, right? A lot of times these can be, I just remember when I was first learning this stuff, it was like super confusing, like, all right, it's E, major, 7, sharp, 5, blah, 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 all that stuff. So I wanted to just take a quick lesson, talk about it, right? So we're gonna do this all based off of an E root note, and then we can really move this around and apply this to anything, all right? So the 7th fret on the A string is where I'm gonna start basing all of these chord names off of, right? A single note is just a note. This is an E. It's not major, it's not minor. The context of everything else has not been determined yet. So the first thing we have to do is think of this as either a major chord or a minor chord, okay? So the way that we build chords, we have a root note, and then we stack a third on top of it, all right? So if we have 7A and 6 on the D string, that's gonna be a major third, so we're off to a great start of potentially some kind of E major chord. Now if it was a minor third, it would be this space right here, this interval. I actually just did a Patreon lesson on this, which kind of inspired just this lesson in general, but there's a little more in-depth stuff on the Patreon if you guys are interested. I'll link you below. Then you get a root note, and if you go diagonal back one from 7A to 6D, that's the beginnings of a major chord. A flat third, as it's called, is the beginnings of a minor chord. Okay, when I say the beginnings, I mean that two notes by themselves can't make what's technically a chord. A chord has to be 3 different notes, at least. Sometimes it could be 4, sometimes it could be 5, goes on and on. But generally you want to have 3 notes to make a chord. Now on guitar, we're at a little bit of a disadvantage because we only have the option to make 6 total notes because there's only 6 strings. On piano, it makes a little more sense when you lay it out, but we're going to talk about why that makes a difference in a second. So let's start it off of an E major beginning, right? We have an E, it's major third, which is G sharp, which is again that 6th fret right there. Now if I put my pointer finger right here, that's going to give me an E major triad, okay? Now again, I've got a little bit of a reach here. This might be an unnatural thing, but again, this will make more sense to you as we go through different names of stuff. But if we were to make that major third minor, just by flattening, and now I have 7, 5, 4 as compared to 7, 6, 4. That's the difference between major and minor. You can kind of hear it, right? I think when you first start thinking of stuff, it's like happy or sad. But it's more complicated than that. It's not just that whole Shazam alternate of universe Mandela effect timeline. There's a lot more that goes into these conspiracy theories than meets the eye. Major, minor, right? Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add every single note on the G string where your pointer finger is, starting from here all the way down to the octave. And we're gonna talk about how that affects the naming of the chord. All right, so what I mean by that is, again, we have this E major chord. If we were to take that note on top and just go 1 higher, changes the chord. Okay, now I have a root note, it's major third, and a sharp 5, we could say. This is called an augmented chord. All right, an augmented chord is just an E major chord with its 5th moved up a fret. Let's keep going. Okay, now this right here, we have the same thing, E major third, and now we have the 6th fret on the G string as well. This is going to be called an E major 6 chord. The reason it's called that is because if we were to take the E major scale, and I'll play it right here, remember this is what we just ended up playing. That note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you play the major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 3, 6. Okay, now technically, this chord is supposed to have the 5th in it. We're supposed to be adding this note to an E major triad. So an E major 6 is supposed to have 4 different notes. Now this is where a lot of confusion sets in, right? What we're doing is we're implying the 5th of this chord, all right? Again, like I said, on guitar, because we're limited to the amount of strings as compared to like a piano. Like I said, you have 88 different keys. You can kind of build. You have 10 fingers, you can play 10 notes on a piano. If you add somebody else's fingers into it, or if you were blessed with one of those 12-finger dispositions, as they call them, or if you're a lizard person, then you can play more chords on a piano because you have more notes available, right? Man, those conspiracy theory metaphors just always making themselves available in plain sight, right? But because we're limited on a guitar, we have some allowances that we can make. Usually the fifth of a chord is going to be implied once we get into like more complicated stuff. So the reason that is because if you just make an E power chord, right? The cool thing about when you first start out playing guitar is you can play a bunch of songs just with power chords. This shape. You can do a lot with just that, right? Well, it really just kind of beefs up that root note, right? It just makes an E sound heavier, right? Not totally necessary as far as harmonizing the chord or as far as what we perceive, what we hear. So that's why this is really an acceptable voicing of an E major 6 chord. All right, so let's keep going on. Now let's go 7A, 6D, 7G. Okay, you have this kind of inverted D major shape. Kind of think of it like a triangle, think of it in shape terms. Really useful chord voicing to use, especially in like bluesy stuff. This is a E7, E dominant 7, okay? That just means an E major with a flat 7. The reason it's a flat 7, again, is from the E major scale. The 7th note is flattened. If it weren't flattened, if it were a natural 7, E major 7. And then if we go your pinky there, octave. Okay, so all I did here is I took an E and a G sharp, 7A, and 6D, and then added a note on the G string. The 4th fret, the 5th fret, 6th fret, 7th fret, 8th fret, 9th fret. And I think that's a great example of how you can name different chords just from what we're hearing as far as moving chromatically one note at a time up a string and then change the name of the chord. Kind of alleviate some of the confusion, all right? So E major, E augmented, E major 6, E7 or E dominant 7, E major 7, and then just kind of like an octave E major again, implying the 5th, all right? Now, if we add, or if we just change that to a minor kind of way of thinking about it, some of the names change too, all right? So we start out here, that's an E minor triad. Right off the bat, when we just raise the 5th to, you might think, oh, maybe that's like E augmented again. Well, this is really interesting, right? And this is really how a lot of what you do on a guitar can be contextual, and you can almost name things just whatever the heck you feel like naming. Because if we take the notes that I have right here, I have an E, I have an E's minor 3rd right here, which is a G, and then now I'm adding a C, right? So an E, a G, and a C. So if you start trying to name this based off of an E, which again, guitar is a very root-centric instrument. It's like, all right, well, I have an E, I have its minor 3rd, and then E, F, G, A, B, C. Is this like a minor 6 or something like that? Well, hold on. E, G, and C in a different order. C, E, G is a C major chord. So this can actually be a C major chord voicing, an inversion, a note where the lowest, or a chord where the lowest note is not the root note. So we have E minor, C major inversion, okay? And you gotta love this one right here. This is pretty cool right here. So we have the 7th fret, again, 7 and 5, and then right there, what do we call this? This is actually the E minor 6, all right? Now again, this is exactly where that top note was on E major 6. To me, this was the most confusing thing, okay? It's like, all right, well, we talked about how we got that 6th note away from E. We played the E major scale to find that 6th note, right? But then when I make it minor, why is that an E minor chord with a major 6? If I were to play the E minor scale, there's that 6th note away. I was under the mistaken impression that building minor chords are built from the minor scale. Why would you think that? Because it just kind of makes sense, right? But guess what? We live in a timeline, we live in a simulation where not everything makes sense. There's glitches in the matrix. So this is why we're gonna call this an E minor 6. It's an E minor chord with a major 6. And this just goes to show you that building chords is really all built from the major scale and altering the major scale. If we were to spell out an E major chord, it would be a 1, 3, 5 in the E major scale, right? If we were to spell out an E minor chord, it would be a 1 flat 3, 5 in the E major scale. So when we make an E minor 6, we spell out an E minor, 1 flat 3, 5, and add the major scale 6. So again, I always thought that was kind of confusing, but once you kind of take those as rules, it just makes more sense, right? So there's E minor 6, really a cool chord. And in fact, a voicing that I use a lot is this right here. I use that voicing of the E minor 6 a lot, or whatever minor chord it is. Again, if I start on the E on the low E string, 12, skip the A string, there's that major 6, 11 D, and then 12 G and B. That's a really cool chord voicing that I like that is rooted on the low E string. All this stuff is movable, so like A minor 6, B flat minor 6, B minor 6, C minor 6, C sharp, so on and so forth, right? So, anyways, back to our minor chords, right? So, 1, flat 3. Now if we do this, the next note, this might sound kind of familiar. This is a minor 7, all right? So a root, a flat 3, 5th is implied, flat 7, okay? So remember, when this was major, it's a dominant 7. If we flatten the 3 to make it a minor class chord, E minor 7. Now this one's really interesting too. Now I've got 7A, 5D, 8G, E, minor major 7. Again, it's funny saying the names out loud in order, talking about the exceptions and how you kind of come about this. A lot of it just kind of proves the point that maybe there's a better way to name these things. Again, I wasn't at the meeting when they discussed it. I tell you what, if I did, things would be different. But really cool chord, all right? It has the edginess of a minor third interval, but the prettiness of that major 7. And the funny thing is, like, I just played that, and you're like, Sean, that's pretty? Oh, sounds terrible. Only because we've been playing it in a minor context. Because that minor third is so, like, prevalent in our mind, it really sounds minor first, pretty second, which is just awful, right? And then again, you have the octave, okay? So let's review everything we just talked about. We've got an E major triad. We have E augmented, E major 6, E 7, E major 7, and back to E. E minor, triad, a C inverted major, a C major inverted is what I'm thinking of here. E minor 6, E minor 7, E minor major 7, back to E. And again, the nice thing about thinking of it this way is it's all movable, and you can actually root these on the low E string. If we wanted to do A, right, we could be A minor, like, so on and so forth, right? How this kind of comes from a practical standpoint of playing is it really is kind of cool to kind of riff on stuff like this, like, and maybe think about, all right, well, what will go over that? Maybe if you're doing like an acoustic guitar background loop, you could do some kind of like E, like major loop, and then just kind of, and then kind of start riffing through those. So aside from it just being a visual representation of chord naming, it does have some utility as far as like maybe soloing, playing lead stuff, making riffs out of things. But it is just something I wanted to spend a few minutes explaining because I know that chord naming was very, very confusing to me specifically, just because of the things that if you don't have the proper kind of mindset coming into it, be like, all right, these chords are based off of a major scale with alterations. Even if it's a minor chord, don't build it from the minor scale. You're just going to get in trouble later on. That kind of stuff really kind of tripped me up. So I thought maybe I'd make this lesson to help people out because people seem to enjoy the one on the Patreon, just talking about intervals and spaces between. So once again, I'm rocking out the D'Angelico Mini DC, going through the Super amp, which has awesome direct out, which allows me to like record videos like this in this apartment that I'm temporarily staying at. So yeah, I'll have Sweetwater affiliate links in the description if you guys are interested. All that stuff really helps me out every time you click from there and order from Sweetwater because they're one of my biggest sponsors. So definitely, if you're ordering anything, do it through one of those links because it helps me out a lot. And if you have any questions, hit me up in the comment section, Instagram, Twitter, or the website. I'll talk to y'all soon. Thanks a lot.